Okay, computer science A, practice test number 3, problem number 3 for response. Again, these are all problems from 2019, last year's AP test, so very relevant, very, similar to the style of questions that you would get this year. And this question, I believe, is fair game this year based off of what is covered on the AP test this year, even though it's modified and less than normal this year. But questions 1, 2, and 3 from last year's AP test, all fair game. So this one has to do with strings. Generally, you're going to have a free response question that has to do with strings. This one's also, also going to have arrays and array lists. That's always at least going to come up on at least one of the free response questions. I think string problems are usually challenging for me. I find them to be hard, but this is not one of those kind of problems. This one's actually kind of feel like nicer. We don't have to do any substring. We don't have to search for anything within strings. Index of contains. We don't have to break strings up and put them back together. That's when I feel like strings get tedious and a little more hard. So this one says many encoded strings contain delimiters. A delimiter is a non-empty string, meaning it is a string that acts as a boundary between different parts of a large string. So this is the delimiters involved in this question occur in pairs that must be balanced, with each pair having an open delimiter and a closed delimiter. There will only be one type of delimiter for each string. The following are examples of delimiters. Expressions in mathematics use open parentheses and closed parentheses as delimiters. For each open parenthesis, there must be matching closed parentheses. So x plus 5 with parentheses times 5 is valid, but x plus parentheses y is not because it doesn't have a closing parenthesis. So that's just kind of an example in the mathematical world of these things that break up our mathematical expressions, but have to have closing matching things. HTML, which is a language used for websites, they have this would be, I think, for bold lettering. Not that you need to know that. Oh, and there it goes. It says it. But it has an open one and then a closed one. And they're in these kind of these brackets, these sharp brackets. So they have to be closed. This doesn't work because it has to be the same. It has to be this. So there's rules. In this question, you will write 2 methods in the following delimiters class. Now, those are just examples, so that you're not going to be using those specific examples. Your class is going to use anything, any symbol to be open or closed, any kind of string to be open or closed delimiter. Usually they kind of have matching. There's something about them that matches up. In this question, you'll write 2 methods, so public class delimiters. So it's good to understand the class that you're writing methods for so that you know what the private instance variables are that you have access to, that you probably need to be referencing. So they have private instance variables, strings, open delimiter, closed delimiter. So we're going to probably be using those things. There's a constructor that they show you, simple constructor, where when you construct a delimiter class object, you construct an open and you give it an open and close arguments, and those get initialized to the private instance variables. There's a method, public array string get delimiters list string token. So it takes an array of tokens, which they're going to explain later, include strings with delimiters, and you're going to give an array list back of just the delimiters. So you're going to look for the delimiters, pull them out, and put them into a new array list. But they're coming from an array, go to an array list. So you're going to get rewarded, penalized for knowing the differences of how to access things from arrays and array lists, or put things in arrays and array lists. There's another method, is balanced. It returns true if the delimiters are balanced and false if otherwise, described in part B. So they're kind of saying up there what it's got to be balanced would be like a valid set of delimiters. So we'll look at that later. And so part A says a string containing text and possibly delimiters has been split into tokens. So this has already been done for you and stored in an array called tokens, an array of strings. Each token is either an open delimiter, a closed delimiter, or a substring that is not a delimiter. So it's already been broken up for you. So that's where some of the messier string stuff is. You're avoiding it on this problem. You're not trying to search for where these are at in a string, break it up yourself. It's already broken up for you. You'll write the method getDelimitersList, which returns an array list containing all open and closed delimiters found in tokens in their original order. The following examples show contents of an array list returned by getDelimitersList for the different open and closed delimiters and different tokens arrays. So here, open delimiter is a parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. So here's tokens, and then you're looking for those, and then you put them in an array list and return the array list when you're done. Or it could be something like HTML. And so this would be the delimiters. Okay, so that's all you're doing is you're going through an array, looking for the open or closed delimiters, and if you find one, just add it to the array list. So the code for this problem is worth 4 points, and I feel like it's not too bad. First of all, we're going to return an array list that doesn't exist yet. We've been given an array, and some people lost points for treating the array like an array list. We also need to create this, so we need to create an array list that holds strings because nothing exists yet. Give it a name. I called mine delimiters list. Some of you guys called it list, just list by itself, and I feel like that's a dangerous name because there's actually a list class in Java that we use. Array lists are actually part of the list class. So we kind of want to avoid names of variables that are like keywords or key classes that we use a lot. First of all, it could cause problems. Second of all, it's just potentially confusing. And it's better to give more thorough names anyways. Instead of just list of what? Delimiters list. Something good. Now, this is an object, so we have to create a new array list. And then you should, again, state what types of objects are in it, and then you have to have these empty parentheses. So that's 1 point out of your 4. Okay. And then we're going to do a for loop. We're just going to go through it. So you should have for loop int index equals 0. Index is less than tokens dot length. Now some of you guys did dot size, but dot size is for array list. This is an array, okay? And you'll lose points for that. So basic stuff you guys got to get right. Differences between arrays and array lists. You got to know which one you're dealing with. You got to know the differences. And then we just need to check if the current spot in tokens, which is an array, so you have to do the brackets index. Don't do dot get. A lot of you guys did. A lot of you guys did dot get index. That will cause you to lose at least 1 point. Tokens index dot equals, because these are objects, these are strings, dot equals. Now we have access to the private instance variables right up here, open del, or, it's got to be or, tokens index dot equals closed delimiter. So you need to test for both of these, and if one or the other is true, then we're going to add it to our new array list. Delimiters list dot add tokens index. And then if you go through and you do the whole thing, then you're done. Now, some of you guys split it up, and you said if it's equal to open, then add it. Else, if it's equal to false, add it. Okay, sure, you could split up, but it's really the same thing. Now, if you split it up, some people said if it's equal to open delimiter, delimiters list add open delimiter, which is fine, but you would have to know which one is which if you're going to do it that way. But if you identify it's one or the other and you put whatever's there, then it'll come out right. The 4 points. So 1 point was for creating the array list for strings. Another one was by accessing all elements of tokens. Now, if you treated it like tokens like an array list, you lost that point. The next point was comparing the strings and tokens with both instance variables in the context of loop. So you had to have dot equals this and dot equals this. And if you did equals, by the way, which some people did, you lost that point. That's for primitives. But if you made the mistake of accessing things like an array list for the second point, then you could still get the third point. Like they would forgive that you lost your point for it, but you can still get the future points. And then the last point is for adding delimiters into the array list in the original order. So you had to make sure. Now, if you were using the array list stuff again, you would still get this point after being penalized for it once earlier. So that's how you would get your 4 points on that question. So part B says, write the method is balanced, which returns true when delimiters are balanced and returns false. Otherwise, delimiters are balanced when both of the following conditions are satisfied. Both of the following conditions are satisfied. Some of you guys only checked for one of the conditions. So there's two conditions, 1 and 2. When traversing the array, so like in the middle of it, from the first element to the last element, there is no point ever where there are more closed delimiters than open delimiters. So you gotta the second condition could be true, and the first one could have failed in the middle. So the first one's like, as you're going, you need to always check if there's more closed than open. If there is, you're done. The other condition is at the total number. So when we're done, that the open delimiters equals the closed delimiters. Okay, they got to match up. And so they give you some examples to help you. I mean, you don't have to understand these ideas to create the code to make sure they're true, but I think they make these ideas make sense. So they give you some examples. Consider delimiters object for which open delimiter is sup and closed delimiter is /sup. The examples below show different array list objects that could be returned by calls to get delimiters list, and the value that would be returned by a call of is balance. So this is kind of like piggybacking off of part A, that part A gives you the list of delimiters. Now we're going to take that list of delimiters and evaluate it. So the following example shows array list for which is balance returns true. As tokens are examined first to last, the number of open delimiters is always greater than or equal to the number of closed delimiters. After examining all tokens, there's an equal number. Now it kind of makes sense that, like thinking of like parentheses, these guys match up, open and close each other. These guys match up, open and close each other. Hold on. These guys match up. They open and close each other, and then the first and last ones match up. So it's kind of like parentheses, right? Like if you had parentheses, these would go together, these go together, and these would go together. Now, this one right here, there's an equal number, except that you can't have the close come before the opening, okay, in a pair. So that's not going to work. And so the easy way to check for that is anytime you have more closing than opening, then something's wrong. So that's one of the other issues. If you just have a single one, that's not good, right? Either opening or closing. Here, the closing ones are never more than the opening ones, but when we're done, it doesn't work because they're not equal. So that's the basic idea. So we're going to go through and we're going to have to keep count. We got to keep track of how many of each there are so that at the end we can check that they equal each other. But also while we're doing it, we need to keep checking and make sure that the closed ones don't become more than the open ones. So even if at the end they're equal, that's not going to be good. So this is going to be worth 5 points. We need a couple things to keep count in the most simple way. So I'm going to call it open delimiter count, and we need to declare them and initialize them. These are local variables. Shouldn't be putting private or public in front. These are just variables within a method. Close delimiter count. So that's a point for creating accumulators and initializing them. Now we're just going to go through, and we've been given an array list called delimiters. Okay, so we don't need to worry about how that was done. We just know we're getting one that's full of delimiters. And so we need to go through it. Int index equals 0. And then index is less than delimiters. Now this is an array list, so this is one where we would say dot size, parentheses, and then index plus plus. Now some of you guys are using for each loops, which are nice, and that could work here too. So there's different ways to do it, but you could check, well, you want to check them separately if it's open or closed, because we have two different things that we're keeping track of how many. So if delimiters.get index, because it's an array list, dot equals, if you use equal equals, you're going to lose a point. Open delimiter. Okay, so we know they're all open and closed delimiters, but we got to figure out which one it is. Now, if it's open, then we should increase the open count, right? Plus plus. Now, some of you guys did else if it equals the closed, or you just did a separate if it equals the closed, and that works. But hey, here's the shortcut. We know they're all open and closed delimiters for sure. So if it's not the open delimiter, it is for sure the closed delimiter. So I don't need to check. You can check, but it's just unnecessary because it's one or the other. So if it's not one, it is the other. Okay. Now here's the deal. In the middle of our for loop, we need to check after every time we check a new delimiter and figure out which one it is. We need to check if the closed ones are more than the open ones. We have to catch this in the middle of going through the array after each time. So if this is greater than, it can be equal to is fine. But if close is greater than open, then that's bad news. We're done. We're not going to go any further. We're going to return in the middle of the for loop. We're going to return false. Now we're never going to return true in the middle of the for loop because we have to check the whole thing. So that's the other thing. Some of you guys did this inside the for loop, and that's good. Some of you guys did it outside the for loop. That's bad. You've missed it. Now, after the for loop is when we want to check the final total amount being balanced. We don't care if they're totally equal while we're going through it, but when we're done, they need to be equal to each other to be balanced. So we catch that issue inside, and then this is an issue at the end. So we'd say, well, if they're equal, then you return true. Else, you return false. Close everything, put semicolons. I'm taking off points for some of you guys for not having closing curly braces and semicolons because you're just doing it too much. If you miss one here, miss like one on a problem, you probably won't get penalized on the AP test. And I'm generally not doing that to you guys, but some of you guys are like leaving like 5 off, and then you're leaving 5 off in the next one. So I'm like, all right, I guess I got to take off points because that might happen to you. It's a dumb way to lose points. Now, if you made the mistake of treating this like an array earlier instead of array list, you'd lose points probably one time. But you get 1 point for the counters, 1 point for accessing all elements of the array list without a bounds error, which is just calling get index, even if you're not doing the right stuff with it. You get a point for comparing strings in delimiters with instance variables. Okay, so you have to be comparing something, a string from this to this, and it has to be dot equals, and then you have to increment your counter correctly. So this is a point, okay, and then a point for identifying and returning the appropriate Boolean value to implement one of the rules. So if you covered one of the rules, you would get the next point. So if you had this, you get this point. If you had this, you get this point. It'd be one or the other. And then the last point is that it's all perfect. You got both rules, everything turns out right. And that's how you get your 5 points. So this was a string problem, but compared to other string problems in other years, I felt like it was not as bad as some of the string problems. So anyways, this is totally fair game on your AP test this year, even with the modified pandemic less material. So far problems 1, 2, and 3 are all possible problems.